Prologue. Davey. Davey had just lost his job to a machine. He was feeling especially rotten, it being the holidays and all that. The only thing that kept him going was the hope of another message from his darling Melody Holmes. It didn't matter how long they were together, how many nights they spent whiling away the hours in the VR chats. Every text, every letter, felt like it might be the last he'd ever hear from her. Maybe it was insecurity, or maybe it was self-loathing, but this time it felt different. This time it might have been forever. Davey had been looking for a job for a few days, but it was basically a futile enterprise. Most of the menial jobs had been automated away, including, but not limited to, truck driving, fast food delivery, bartending, and even sitcom writing. They hadn't exactly gotten to the sentient robot level, but it was only a matter of time. The human services industry provided shelter for a lucky few. Doctors, nurses, teachers, and therapists held on to their positions with an iron fist. The rest got by on odd gigs like walking dogs, cleaning toilets, or the digital equivalent of dancing a jig on a street corner with your hat in your hand. A social media app called We're Live had taken the world by storm, and over the years it had reached its tentacles into every aspect of American life. On We're Live, you could make a phone call, message your friends, hail a driverless car, order contactless chow mein. You could even buy or sell cryptocurrency. Most importantly, you could share your life with the world. And if you were funny enough, or sexy enough, or popular enough, you might even get some money out of it in the form of digital tips. Nobody had a job, but at least they had their own show. That was the one thing humans still had going for them, their unique and individual personalities. Davey never had much of a personality. At least that's what his 7th grade science teacher used to tell him. She used to call him Smiley because he never laughed at any of her terrible jokes. Davey was the guy who told the robots what to do. He programmed the routines and trained the pathfinding algorithms, making sure the machines could navigate the warehouses full of packages at the materia fulfillment center with the utmost efficiency. And he was good at what he did. The best, in fact. Because of the changes Davey had implemented, the company had fulfilled more orders in the past 3 months than they did in the whole of last year. But the robots didn't need Davey anymore. His boss couldn't tell him what it was, but apparently something big was coming. Something that would eliminate the need for boxes, packing peanuts, and the fulfillment center itself. Something that would change, well, everything. When they let him go, Human Resources said it wasn't because of any failings on his part. They chalked it up to task encroachment. That was 3 days ago. Davey thought he would use his free time to do some due diligence on his replacement, to see what the big fucking deal was. He took a ride on the light rail down to the glass tesseract in the middle of downtown Hyper Seattle. From the outside, it looked like a twisted square, an architectural version of an M.C. Escher painting. From the inside, it was a labyrinth of halls filled with automated shops, bars, and restaurants. Though they had taken their livelihoods, they could never fully remove people's need to congregate. Davey remembered the place from when he was a kid. He used to go there with his mother, sit on Santa's lap, and ask him for products. People didn't put much stock in gods anymore. But at least Santa continued to move units. However, Davey never got anything good because his dad had always been a bit of a Scrooge. Davey sat in the corner of the graffiti-riddled train as it scraped along the rails of the underground tunnel. The passengers packed in like sardines. A pair of riders had gotten into a political spat about 2 seats away from him. Davey picked up his bag and laid it down on his other side, coddling it in the crook of his arm. He pulled the phone from his pocket and checked his text messages. It was one of those old kidney-shaped phones they used in the early 2000s. The color was a neon yellow, and it had the chiclet-style physical buttons that went tick-tick-tick when you pressed on them. There was nothing new from Melody. The altercation between the 2 passengers grew louder. They were openly throwing hands now, and it wasn't like there was a driver on the train to kick them off. They automated them years ago. One of the standing room-only passengers discreetly pressed the emergency button. Instinctively, Davey covered the lower half of his face with his shirt collar. Then his phone vibrated, and he rushed to read the message. It was Melody, all right, as he had hoped. The corners of his mouth turned up in just a hint of a smile. The train came to a stop in the tunnel below the mall, and as soon as the doors opened, he fought his way through the crowd. The brawlers spilled out onto the tarmac, wrestling each other to the ground. The passengers stepped over them like it was nothing. Davey noticed 2 security guards exit the elevator nearby, and he hurried up onto the escalator. It was a lengthy ride from the bottom of the tunnel to the atrium up above. Davey slung his heavy bag over his shoulder and took a moment to gaze up through the glass roof. Flecks of snow fell onto the panes, and they were sticking, which was rare. Silent Night was playing on the loudspeakers. The mall was overflowing with patrons, and the line for the kiosk was even longer than Davey had expected. They called it the Materia Portal. It was big and shaped like a dome, with glass walls around its sides. It looked like a larger version of an airport X-ray machine. One by one, enthusiastic shoppers would walk into the dome, and the walls would spin around, concealing them inside. They would disappear for a few minutes, and then each successive customer would come out the other end, holding something new, usually gift-wrapped. Finally, Davey arrived at the portal. "Welcome to Materia. Please log in," said a disembodied voice. Davey stepped into the booth and looked warily into the facial scanning machine. A ray of green light passed over his boyish features, and a helpful message confirmed he logged into his Materia account. "Welcome, Davey," said the voice, and the walls spun around, enclosing him within its chrysalis. The lights dimmed, and the glass walls displayed a carousel of product images on each pane. They drifted slowly in a circle. Davey swiped his hand along the wall, rotating through a bevy of clothing articles. Whenever he pointed and lingered on an item, the display shifted into a mirror image, and the product was overlaid on his body as if he were wearing it. He tried on a few suits, a hat, and some scarves. Finally, he decided on a beautiful navy blue suit with a red tie. He couldn't possibly afford it, having just lost his job, and it wasn't something he would normally wear. But he decided to throw caution to the wind. What did he have to lose? He pressed the purchase button on the wall display and watched the digital coins drain from his Materia account. There were some whirring noises from within the machine as it sprang to life. After folding his clothes into a neat pile on the bench beside him, he stood with his arms out in a T-shape as an array of blue lasers drew the suit upon him. They emitted a pleasant humming sound, wrapping him in a blanket of light. Layer after layer, thread after thread, the suit appeared, as if by magic. Afterwards, Davey admired himself in the mirrored walls. He adjusted his tie and cufflinks and snapped on a pair of black leather gloves. The lights came on. "Thank you for shopping with Materia. Please come back soon," said the voice as he exited out the other side. Davey crossed through the portal line and made his way to the food court in the center of the glass tesseract. He was dragging his feet now, his breath a little more labored. Davey was only 18 years old, but he walked like he carried the weight of 1,000 pounds on his shoulders. He stopped and ordered a peppermint macchiato from one of the vending machines and took a seat at the cafeteria table, setting his bag down beside him. He sipped from the straw as he gathered his bearings, watching the lights of the carousel from the corner of his eye. A child cried in the distance. The noise, coupled with the light bloom, must have triggered something in him. A high-pitched squeal rang through his ears, and he covered his face with his hands. The phone buzzed. Davey wiped his eyes and took it out, struggling to read the message from Melody. He stood up. The child cried again. Davey turned and faced the carousel where he could see the kid standing beside it, wailing as if he had just lost a scoop of ice cream to the floor. The kid's older brother had set him down while he climbed onto a horse with his friends. Davey looked down at his bag, then at his phone, and then at the kid crying. He knew he shouldn't intervene, but he couldn't stand the noise anymore. Plus, the kid would surely draw undue attention. He put the phone back in his pocket and walked over to the kid. The boy stopped crying and looked up at him. His brother continued to ride the carousel, oblivious to what was going on. Davey lifted the kid and grabbed the bar, steadying himself. He raised the boy onto a horse before climbing on himself. Davey sat on the horse, sullen, while the boy giggled, as if in a state of bliss. The boy's brother was laughing too and talked with his friends, until he looked behind him and saw his little brother sitting with the strange man on the horse. The older boy just looked at Davey for a bit before dismissing him, turning back to his friends. Davey rode the carousel for about 5 minutes, watching the lights melt into a whirl around him. The child on his lap laughed and pointed in every direction, and even Davey tried to smile. As the carousel slowed to a crawl, Davey heard the muffled sound of someone yelling at him. "Anthony? Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing?" the woman yelled, dropping her bags of food and rushing toward them. Davey picked up the boy and placed him in his mother's arms. She swaddled him and kissed him on the head, staring Davey down with a look that could only have meant, "Don't you dare touch my child again, or I'll cut your heart out and feed it to you while it's still beating." The boy's brother and friends dismounted and stared at Davey in disbelief. "I'm sorry. I was just," Davey explained, but felt his words slurring. He could feel it coming on again. The blur. "Just stay away from me," the woman hissed. She grabbed her other son's arm and dragged him away. The older boy looked back at Davey again. Davey shrugged and returned to his table. The older boy kept looking back, holding his mother's hand and staring at Davey. Davey sat down, taking a loud sip from his straw as he finished the remnants of his drink. The phone vibrated once more, and Davey read the message. A tear came to his eye. This was it. This was the last time he would hear from her. He looked up and saw the mom talking to the 2 security guards from the tunnel. A sense of urgency overtook him. He grabbed the bag, unzipped it, turned it over, and spilled its contents onto the floor. The guards had spotted him and made haste towards him. They didn't look too concerned about the mother and the child. No, it was something different. They must have known the truth. They must have known by now that Melody was dead, and he had killed her. Or at least, that's what they thought. Davey slid the jerry can of gasoline out of his bag. It was a big red barrel, the kind with the X on the front. He looked at the mother in the distance, cradling the child in her arms. She was staring at him, too. Davey went over to the empty carousel and pulled the lever, starting it up again. He held onto the golden spiraled handlebar and spun around it like Fred Astaire in Singing in the Rain. The volunteer teenage ride supervisor, who was talking to one of her friends, finally noticed him. She yelled and screamed at him to get off. As the carousel spun, Davey drained the contents of the bottle onto the floor. The people in the line were beginning to realize the gravity of the situation. Panicked mothers and fathers grabbed their kids by the arms and scattered towards the exits like frightened rodents. Satisfied, Davey adjusted his tie and lifted the bottle above him. He could still see the angry mother in the distance. She mouthed the words, "Oh God," and then pressed her younger child's face into her breast. The guards were closer now, and they were pushing their way through the crowd, fighting against the tide. Davey poured the remnants of the gasoline over his head, drenching himself in the stuff. He heard the familiar chime of his phone. It vibrated again, so much that it twisted off the table and fell face down onto the floor below. "Oh God," the woman said. "Oh God." Then Davey smiled and lit the match.